feels like in 2025, training content got super confusing for a lot of people, and it took away from people understanding what the principles actually leading to long-term muscle growth are. This series is aimed at dispelling some of that confusion and getting you to focus on what truly matters over the long term for getting huge. These are the exact same principles that I've used in my training for the last 15 years, as well as how I have been helping my coaching athletes get really great results, whether that's in their powerlifting competitions or just getting jacked. So today we're going to go through the principles behind making decisions for making a good effective program. So we have to start off with the filter and the principles before we get into the nitty-gritty like volume, intensity, and frequency. But at the end of this video, you should hopefully have a good framework as to how to make any training decisions going forward that are going to be suitable for your muscle building goal. The training decision filter is how I go about making programs both for myself as well as for my athletes, because this is the backbone, right? This is how we are making effective decisions and how we are personalizing an approach to an individual. A lot of times when you're looking at social media, people are talking in generalities, and that's why I am going to keep this up throughout the entire series, so that when I'm going through things like volume recommendations, exercise recommendations, that you can take them and put them through this training decision filter and see how that makes sense for you, because we're all different. We all have different capabilities. We're going to be different experience levels. We're going to have different equipment available to us at the gym. We're going to have different time available to us to train, and all of that is going to have to be passed through this. The first thing that we're going to look at is, does what we are doing within a program, does it actually fit the goal? And that comes down to specificity. So for example, if you're looking to build muscle, it is probably not the smartest thing in the world if you are just doing a ton of cardio based training and you're not doing any weight training. Okay, that should make sense. But at the same time, I've had conversations with many people through consultations, and the amount of cardio that they're doing relative to the amount of weight training they're doing would not be congruent with the goal of trying to build muscle. At the same time, if your goal is maximum muscle building, we probably shouldn't be overly focused on strength ranges. So what I'm talking about here is if you're doing lots of singles, lots of doubles, lots of triples within your training for squat, bench, and deadlift, probably not the best approach in terms of time efficiency, but also as well in terms of stimulus per set and what that also takes away from within the session itself. So we ideally want to have our training program set up in a way that it's going to be specific enough towards achieving that desired adaptation. That's going to be the sets, the reps, the intensity, the exercise selection, and all of the other training variables, which we're going to get to in later videos. So second in our training decision filter is, can it be progressed? And this is paying homage to the principle of overload. If we want to get bigger and stronger in the gym over time, we need to be having performance increases take place. We need to be progressing our load. We need to be progressing our reps. And this is the principle of overload encompassed in a more practical setting, okay? The misconception when it does come to progressing or progressive overload is that we are adding reps and we're adding load to progress. But the case is that we are actually making an adaptation, and we need to achieve an extra stimulus the following week to have that adaptation continue further. So an example here would be, if I do 100 kilos for 10 reps today, if I come in and do 100 kilos for 10 reps next week, I will already have built up a resilience to that stress. I've made that adaptation. So next week, if I want to have some type of further adaptation happen again, I need to have an increase in stimulus or an increase in performance. So maybe I need to come in and do 100 kilos for 11 reps, or 100 kilo or 102 kilos for 10 reps. So once the performance increase is happening and then there's an extra stimulus being incurred, then overload is going to have been taking place. We need to have both our exercise selection set up in a way that we're going to be able to progress them nicely. So an example here would be, if you are doing like a squat and a BOSU ball, it doesn't have the best propensity to overload because there's lots of other limitations that may kind of impede you from overloading over time, such as stability. If you are thinking about doing something like a bodyweight squat, well, if you're just looking to just do bodyweight and you're not looking to ever overload it through actual resistance or external resistance, like adding plates or adding a bar, well, then you're going to run into the issue where you're just going to be progressing on the likes of other sets or reps. And at a certain point, that will become very inefficient for full body development. So that's why when we're looking at actually progressing through certain exercises, we're looking at ones that we can add resistance to. So either on machines, cables, dumbbells, free weights. And then alongside that, it needs to be an exercise that is going to be comfortable for you to be able to progress. So it shouldn't be an exercise which you are maybe experiencing some pain around, or you have some limitations in certain joints. So this is also where we kind of have to factor in the likes of overload as well as specificity. So we need to have the rep range or the set targets or the loading range specific enough that we're going to be able to realistically drive overload, but we're also going to have the exercise selection specific enough to our body and our capabilities and our injury history that we can actually achieve overload while also kind of paying credence to the fact that we need to be able to do this repeatedly and consistently over time. Which leads me to the next point. Can it be repeated consistently? And this pays attention to the likes of enjoyment and realism. And I think this is one thing that people do miss out massively when it does come to actually making good gains over time, is that while we can make a plan really specific, we can really kind of focus on, like, setting up our progression schemes or whatever, ensure that we're achieving overload. We can have all our exercise selection to be like really science-based or whatever it may be, extremely optimal. A lot of the times people want to enjoy their training, right? And that may mean that they don't want to come into the gym and set themselves up with cuffs or daisy chains or wherever it may be. I know for me personally, I'm going to do some things within my training program that from an optimal lens may not necessarily be the most optimal way of doing things, but some of it just pays heedance to the fact that I want to enjoy my training. So examples would be, given my powerlifting background, I do like to do deadlifts within my training. I like to do some bent over rows or pen lay rows. I like to do bench press, right? Now, the optimal view would say, well, maybe these exercises are not like the best thing for achieving like a great stimulus per set. Deadlift, for example, doesn't achieve any great stimulus per any particular body part. It's more of a mid-range exercise. No muscles are going through a very long muscle length when you're doing it. And this could be, a fucking reason not to do them. But at the same time, I enjoy deadlifting. If that's one exercise within my program and one exercise within my pull day or my leg day, alongside every other exercise that's there, well then, how much of a difference is it going to make? But it's going to be something that's give me enjoyment to my training, make me excited to get into the gym, and as a result, that's going to cause me to come into the gym consistently. Another example here of can it be repeated consistently is if you are in a busy gym and you only have the cable stack as a day on your program. Is it likely that if you train at a busy hour within the gym that you could take that cable space for the entire session? If you are a complete asshole, yes, probably you could. But the reality is, if you are training a busy gym and you have a wide array of different machines on your program, there is a likely chance that you may not be able to be consistent 100% with it over long term. Maybe you will have to have your exercise order being messed up. That's generally okay. But it could also be a fact that like you just don't get to do exercises as consistently as possible, right? And that can lead to inconsistency overall, inconsistent stimulus that you're getting over time. So that's another factor to put into context when it does come to designing a training program. There's also going to be the fact that like, well, maybe if you have certain exercises, supersets, giant sets programmed into your training, that they may not necessarily be things that are completely realistic. Maybe your leg extension is on one side of the gym and the lion hamstring curl is on the other side of the gym. Well, that rules out that superset. These are also things to fit into the actual training decision filter. Can this program be repeated consistently? If you train in different gyms all the time, you do a lot of traveling, maybe you want to have more barbells within the training program. Most gyms have barbells within their gym. They have dumbbells within the gym. But cables can vary, machines can vary, and that can make it very difficult to track stimulus and overload. So maybe barbells are going to be something that's a lot better for your goal. Then after that is, does it actually produce results in real people? And this is super, super important, right? Because ultimately we want to ensure that what we're doing is working. Now, if we have paid attention to specificity, we've paid attention to setting up our training program in a way that's going to encourage overload, and we are going to be enjoying it, and the program is going to be easy to repeat consistently, well then it should lead to effectiveness. And why I say in real people is because when we maybe see some information online, sometimes we are going to get flooded with mechanisms. Sometimes we're going to get flooded with what seems to happen within certain muscle fibers or expressions of muscle fibers. And it's really important to look at what real people do as opposed to just looking at mechanistic based research or rodent based research. And this is why looking at longitudinal research is important, as well as what do other big and strong and jacked people train like. And we can see a wide variety of ways that people are training for bodybuilding. You see people doing high volume, you see people doing high intensity, you see people who are doing more time efficient based training strategies and getting phenomenal results. And a lot of times it's because these three are taken care of that is leading to this. So now that we have went through our training decision filter and we know what the back structure of creating a program is going to look like in regards to what we're going to refer to every time we're making a decision, it's going to be actually really easy for us to understand why most people's programs end up failing. Probably one of the most common ones is people not having a progression plan. So I see all the time when people start up with coaching me is that people get so used to getting up to a certain weight and then feeling as if they shouldn't really kind of surpass that. Maybe they feel as if the next weight is going to be that little bit too heavy, or they're just using a single rep target, right? They could be saying, okay, I'm going to work up to that 100 kilos for 10 reps, but they only think about kind of keeping it to 10 reps and not going above, not going below. And that is repeated in every single exercise in the program. Everything is just like this exercise by 10 reps. And this can be easily solved by having different type of progression schemes. And we're going to talk about that in a later video when we go through progression methods. But something as simple as having a double progression model where you essentially increase reps within a range and then you add weight could be something so simple to help encourage overload, to allow people to train to their capacity and continue having this rate of adaptation occur. So another really common reason why a lot of people don't grow as much muscle as they should is because they're actually doing too much volume. And why this is actually an issue is not because like doing more volume is not effective for growing muscle. It's that, number one, it's not realistic for them, right? They are fitting in too much into a single session and they're just not able to keep up that level of training volume on a week-to-week basis. And as a result, their volume levels are going up, they're going down, up, going down, and they're never really actually being truly consistent. And this could even be just down to, doing too many training days, right? Somebody's committing to doing 5 days of training when they can realistically only get to the gym consistently for 3. So this is a big reason why a lot of people will end up kind of not growing as much muscle. And we're not even talking about like your recovery variables here when it does come to like the lifestyle situation, because we could go into a massive rabbit hole on that, but that's also going to encompass to doing too much volume. People are not able to recover appropriately from doing a certain amount of volume, and then as a result their training blocks end up being really, really short, they're deloading too often, and then they just never really kind of make as much gains as they should. So the inverse of that is going to be that people are doing not enough work, or they're not doing enough intensity. And to be honest, a lot of these actually just go hand in hand because volume and intensity go together. When we're actually looking at a lot of people when they do come into the gym at first, they will probably run into the issue of actually just doing too much volume, but they're not doing enough intensity. And then you have people flip around where they overemphasize intensity, but they're actually not doing as much volume as they need. So this could also be a bottleneck that people run into when it does come to the programs. They're not actually training, again, the appropriate amount of sets that they need to grow and progress. And as we get into the volume, intensity, frequency video, we're going to go through how to actually make these decisions for yourself with actually volume landmarks. So the fourth factor is a pretty obvious one, that the training we're doing is just not sustainable. That could be either that we're doing too much volume, we're doing too many training days. It could be a case that we're doing just way too much intensity per session and we are not recovering, or it's just not fit within our lifestyle. So again, that not sustainable is going to fit within the likes of the enjoyment of realism. It's going to fit within efficacy, and it's going to go against them. It's going to go against it. This is not an effective strategy, even if on paper it is working well. And this could be tied to too much volume. It could be tied to too much intensity. It could be tied to too little. It could be tied to the fact there's no progression plan, because all of these are going to infringe on this. In my opinion, is a very overlooked aspect when it does come to long-term growth in the gym and long-term muscle building. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be doing this thing for decades if we want to maximize our muscular potential. It's not about having the optimal arrangement of training variables lined up all the time, and it's unrealistic to expect that as well, because as you age, as you go through different life stages, you're going to have those training arrangements and training variables set up in a way that's going to suit your life situation. It's going to also have to suit your level in terms of your training capacity, and then as well in regards to your preferences. So we always need to be kind of thinking about like, what is actually making our training enjoyable? And so many people are not going to be consistent long term, and they're not going to achieve good level of results because a lot of these things here are not going to lead to training being enjoyable. If you don't feel as if you're progressing with your training, you don't feel like you're getting stronger, you don't see like a logbook moving up or see something happening, because, you know, let's face it, looking at actual visual change, it takes a long period of time. So probably the best way to actually gauge a proxy for muscle growth is going to be looking at performance. And we don't feel as if that's happening within the training program. We're lifting the same weights over and over again. We're not going to enjoy the training. We're not going to be consistent. We're going to stop showing up. If we feel as if we're doing too much volume, we're overworking ourselves, we're doing so much work, but we're not getting any return, and that could come down to just poor recovery outside the gym, well, that is still something that we could work around in our program, because maybe sometimes the lifestyle variables can also be fixed and take a longer time to change. So maybe actually change your program is going to be the first thing and most effective thing for us to actually change out the gate, while we work on maybe some things outside the gym. But at the same time, if we're always putting in a load of work and we're not getting a return on investment, not going to be enjoyable, we're not going to be consistent. And we can say the exact same here. If we feel like we're going to the gym, we're not being stimulated enough, right? We feel like we're going there, we're being consistent with showing up, but we are consistently not training hard enough. And that could just be a case that you have never been shown how to train hard enough. Maybe you need accountability, maybe you need a coach, maybe you need a personal trainer or a training partner there to show you what intensity feels like. But if you're always showing up, and you're like showing up is the most important part, right? People always say that, but you're not getting results. Okay, well, at a certain point, you're gonna be like, well, this is not working, so I'm not gonna continue showing up. And then as a result, the gym is turned into a place that you're not really enjoying, and you're not really going to be positioned to actually build muscle. Then, if it's not sustainable, program's too complex, it doesn't fit your lifestyle, it doesn't fit your time demands or time availability that you have within the gym, that's also not going to be enjoyable, because you're not going to get the results. We could look at improper exercise selection, because that is also going to be something that's not going to lead to having great results. Whether that's picking exercises which actually don't really provide you with a great stimulus. Maybe after the exercise, you feel other muscle groups have taken over. Maybe with the exercise itself, you never feel like you connect with the target muscle. You never feel like that muscle is the thing that's a limiting factor on that exercise. Maybe it's the fact that maybe the exercise you're picking are going to be suited towards somebody else's body type versus your body type, because limb segments and torso segments, they do affect certain movement patterns, such as squatting, deadlifting, bench pressing, and these are also things that we need to factor into when we're personalizing a program and making exercise selection specific to the person, which again comes to training decision filter number 1, which is specificity. And then tied into that is going to be, well, exercise that you just enjoy. I know for a fact that even though I need to grow my delts, I don't like doing a dumbbell shoulder press. Getting the dumbbells up is a fucking ball ache after you get to a certain weight. So I don't want to do that exercise, but I will do a barbell, I'll do any machine, I'll do any type of raise. But that one exercise, I don't want it. So you know what? I'm not going to program it in, because ultimately that for me would be improper exercise selection, because it's going to take away from enjoyable. It's not going to be sustainable, because at a certain weight, I'm no longer going to be able to get the dumbbells up and press them and progress them. And the final point on exercise selection is that you can pick exercises that are putting you in pain, or maybe you have an injury history around. Sure, you can work with physio and help with overcoming some of that pain, but ultimately at the end of the day, we should probably pick exercises which are going to allow us to work around the pain, or even have different type of programming setups in regards to the training variables, which we can talk about in later videos, set up to help you train a movement part or train a body part while avoiding pain. But at the same time, if we're picking exercises that are actively putting us in pain, well, it's going to completely go against all of the decision filter principles, right? It's going to go against overload. It's going to go against enjoyment. It's going to go against efficacy. And it's not going to be specific to you, because I'm not paying attention to what you're specifically bringing to the table for your goal. So as you can see, everything comes back to this. And we're going to refer to this over and over again as we go through the next series of videos. And the next one is going to be on volume, intensity, and frequency, which is going to be a meaty one, because people love to talk about volume, intensity, and frequency. But we're going to make it as clear and actionable as possible. So if you like the video, stick around, subscribe, leave a comment, ask any questions. I'll catch you in the next one.